Chapter 1. The needle pierced his jaw. Vareth pulled the golden thread tight, aggressively stitching his own cracking skin to lock the apocalyptic shadow inside his veins. The billion slaughtered souls in his head screamed in an endless, agonizing chorus. He was inside the absolute zero vault. There were no doors, no windows. It was a pocket dimension that shifted its coordinates across the multiverse every 3 seconds. It was mathematically impossible to enter. He pulled the needle for the next stitch. It didn't move. Something had caught the other end of the thread. Vareth froze. He slowly opened his golden eyes. A girl was sitting on the steel table directly in front of him. She wasn't fully there. For a fraction of a second, her left shoulder flickered into pure black static, a missing frame in reality before snapping back into solid flesh. She didn't breathe. Her pitch-black, unblinking eyes were staring intently at the golden thread suspended between her freezing fingers and his bleeding jaw. "It tastes like a bruised Tuesday," she said. Her voice had no air behind it. It didn't travel through the room. It simply appeared inside his skull, heavy and distorted, like a scratched audio file playing underwater. Vareth didn't ask how she got in. He didn't ask who she was. The Demon King reacted with pure, lethal instinct. He unleashed his aura. A shockwave of antimatter shadow exploded from his chest, designed to instantly delete anything it touched. The steel table beneath her disintegrated into dust. The shockwave slammed into her face. It didn't burn her. It didn't throw her back. The world-ending shadow hit her skin, paused, and simply sucked inward. It vanished into her pores like a drop of water on dry sand. Omen tilted her head. A slow, mechanical tilt that defied the anatomy of a neck. "You are sowing the loud," she whispered in his mind. Vareth stood up, towering over her. The golden threads in his skin burned white-hot. "You do not exist. Exist, to take up space." She executed a rapid, unnatural double blink. "I am just a syntax error. Why is your geometry screaming? Get out of my vault." His voice vibrated in 3 demonic pitches, cracking the dimensional walls around them. "What is a door?" she asked. She leaned forward. Her face was inches from his chest. And then it happened. The billion screaming voices in Vareth's head stopped. Not muffled, not quieted. Violently, instantaneously erased. Total, absolute silence. Vareth stopped breathing. The crushing, apocalyptic pressure in the room vanished. His pupils dilated so fast they consumed his golden irises. His chest heaved. He staggered back, but his body refused to move away from her. For the first time in 10 millennia, the agonizing war in his mind was dead. "What did you do to me?" The demonic echo in his voice was completely gone. It was raw, shaking, terrified. "Your static is scratching my quiet," Omen observed. She looked down at the golden thread still trapped between her fingers. "Do not pull that," Vareth ordered, his breath hitching. "It is tied wrong," she said. She pulled. The thread snapped. Catastrophe erupted inside the vault. The thick seam on Vareth's jaw tore open. Pure, corrosive dark matter exploded from the gash, lashing out violently to consume the room. It whipped toward Omen's throat. Vareth braced for her to be erased. She didn't move. She parted her lips. The shadow rushed into her mouth. She swallowed the destruction of a universe without a single sound. The explosive energy was gone, leaving only the deafening silence. Omen looked at his bleeding jaw. "I have empty," she whispered, her voice glitching into a dozen robotic echoes. "Do you want to be unwritten?" Vareth stared at the anomaly sitting on the ruins of his table. The silence in his mind wasn't just peace. It was a violent, instant addiction hooking its claws directly into his soul. The moment she leaned a millimeter away, a single, agonizing whisper returned to his brain. He couldn't let the noise come back. He would burn the cosmos before he let it return. The Demon King dropped to his knees. He leaned forward, pressing his bleeding face directly into Omen's freezing, static-laced palm. His massive shoulders shuddered. "Don't stop," Vareth whispered, his voice cracking, stripping away every ounce of his terrifying majesty. "Don't let them scream again." Chapter 2. The absolute zero vault was impenetrable, but the violent absence of Vareth's world-ending aura triggered the castle's emergency failsafes. The invisible dimensional walls shattered like cheap glass. Vexla, the royal executioner, charged through the breach. A dozen elite guards flooded the room, their heavy boots slamming against the stone. They all froze. Vareth, the Demon King, the ruler of the fractured cosmos, was on his knees. His bleeding face was pressed firmly against the anomaly's pale, freezing hand. "My lord," Vexla shouted, raising his scythe. "The grid is breaking. Step away from it." Vareth didn't move his face. He inhaled the absolute, agonizingly beautiful quiet radiating from her skin. "Get out," Vareth commanded. His voice was raw. "She is a tear in the fabric," Vexla roared, stepping forward. "The lords are marching on the capital. We must execute her before reality collapses." Vareth slowly turned his head. His glowing golden eyes flared with a lethal, possessive rage. "Touch her," Vareth snarled, "and I will erase your bloodline from time." A guard didn't listen. Driven by pure terror, he lunged from the flank, swinging a heavy iron broadsword directly at Omen's neck. Omen didn't dodge. She didn't blink. She just looked at the guard. Reality violently snapped. The heavy iron sword didn't hit her. The instant it entered her personal space, it turned into a flock of dead black moths that immediately dissolved into ash. But the glitch didn't stop there. The guard's heavy steel armor inverted. The solid metal folded completely inside out like wet paper. The man dropped to the floor. He opened his mouth to let out a blood-curdling scream, but the sound was completely deleted from the air. Silence. Instead of a scream, a thick stream of black, viscous sludge poured rapidly from his throat, pooling on the floor. Total chaos erupted. The other guards stumbled backward, dropping their weapons in pure, unadulterated horror. Omen tilted her head. A jagged, unnatural movement. "The gray ones are coughing backwards," she whispered. She didn't use the air. The words scratched directly into the center of their brains, heavy and wet. They forgot to peel the loud. Vexla dropped his scythe. He clamped both hands over his ears, his eyes wide with agony. Dark crimson blood violently poured from his nose and ears. The sheer conceptual weight of her voice was physically tearing his mind apart. "Retreat!" Vexla choked out, spitting blood. Two guards grabbed the silent, writhing man on the floor and dragged him out. The remaining guards fled in pure panic. The broken dimensional walls violently sealed shut behind them, locking the room once more. Vareth stood up. His massive chest heaved. The golden thread stitched into his skin burned white-hot, struggling to hold his monstrous shadow inside. He looked at Omen. She was staring blankly at the black sludge on the floor. "They will try to kill you," Vareth said. Desperation bled heavily into his tone. Omen turned to him. "Kill, to force an end." She stepped closer. Her bare feet made no sound. She didn't look at his face. She stared directly at his massive chest. "Your hollow is bruised purple," she said, her voice glitching, splitting into a dozen discordant, abstract echoes. She raised her hand. She didn't touch his armor. Her pale fingers plunged straight through the solid metal, through his stitched skin, and directly into the metaphysical core of his soul. Vareth gasped. His body convulsed. It wasn't pain. It was a localized, existential deletion. The exact space inside his chest where her hand rested was simply gone. His frantic, roaring heartbeat literally stumbled into an absolute void. Omen looked up at him. Her void black eyes were terrifyingly blank. "The engine is chewing on the noise," she whispered, her face inches from his. "I have more empty. Crawl inside?" Chapter 3. Let us see what the void truly eats, my king. The voice echoed from the ceiling. It belonged to Crix, the High Chancellor. Above them, the impenetrable stone of the Absolute Zero Vault simply melted. A jagged dimensional tear ripped open. Before Vareth could roar a command, a swarm of pure, shrieking shadows poured through the crack. Mind parasites. Faceless, formless horrors designed to latch onto a soul and violently drain its sanity. They flooded the room, turning the air freezing cold. Vareth didn't hesitate. He reacted with pure, feral desperation. He didn't care about the castle. He didn't care about the Chancellor's treason. He only cared about the absolute beautiful silence radiating from the girl in front of him. He would burn the cosmos before he let them take it away. Vareth reached up and violently ripped the remaining golden threads from his neck. Every seal broke at once. "Get away from her!" Vareth roared. He didn't just unleash his aura. He lost his physical shape completely. His skin tore open with blinding, destructive light. Thousands of massive, unblinking golden eyes ripped open across the sprawling, monstrous shadows that erupted from his spine. He became a towering, incomprehensible nightmare, the true form of the Demon King, the shape of the apocalypse. The room's gravity collapsed. The stone floor shattered into dust under his immense, crushing weight. Vareth lunged, his monstrous shadow claws shredding dozens of parasites into nothingness. But there were too many. 3 parasites bypassed his massive claws. They shrieked, diving straight for Omen's face. Vareth let out a devastating, 3-layered roar, reaching for her. He was a fraction of a second too late. The first parasite slammed into her chest. And then, reality broke again. It wasn't a fight. It was an instant, impossible glitch. The moment the parasite touched Omen's skin, all sound in the room was violently muted. The air around them inverted into a blinding photonegative. The parasite opened its maw to shriek, but the sound didn't travel. Instead, the shriek physically shattered into a pile of black, rotten teeth that clattered onto the stone floor. Vareth froze, his thousands of golden eyes widening in pure horror. The parasite didn't die. It unhappened. It flattened, its 3-dimensional shadow instantly compressed into a 2-dimensional charcoal drawing on the floor, and then flaked away into empty space. Gone. Omen stood in the center of the warped, glitching gravity. Her pale hair floated completely sideways. She caught the second parasite in her bare hand. "The hungry echoes are chewing on their own yesterday," Omen whispered. Her voice was entirely wrong. It sounded like a dead ocean crashing against a dry shore. They forgot how to breathe forward. Vareth stared at her. His feral mind, entirely consumed by his monstrous transformation, tried to decode the abstract horror of her words. It meant nothing. It was a terrifying string of concepts that made his skull throb. She didn't crush the parasite. She just opened her hand. The shadow creature didn't try to fly away. It violently folded into itself, shrinking smaller and smaller until it became a single speck of black ash. The chaotic shrieking in the vault died instantly. The remaining swarm didn't attack. They evaporated in pure, conceptual terror. Vareth was left standing in the ruins of the room, his true form fully exposed. He was a jagged mountain of dark matter and 1,000 glowing, predatory eyes. Everything in the multiverse feared this form. It was madness made flesh. He waited for her to scream. He waited for the disgust. Omen turned to him. Her pitch-black eyes stared directly up at the terrifying mass of shadows towering over her. She didn't back away. She walked straight into his devastating, world-ending aura. "Stop," Vareth growled. His voice was a jagged, demonic earthquake that shook the foundation of the castle. "Do not come closer. I will tear you apart." Omen ignored him. She reached up. Her freezing, pale hand brushed directly against one of the massive golden eyes on his monstrous shadow arm. Vareth's breath hitched. His entire massive frame shuddered. "Your dark is very quiet," Omen said. Her voice returned to a flat, dead calm. She stroked the terrifying shadow. She treated his world-ending form like a stray, wounded animal. She stepped closer, closing the distance until her small chest brushed against his monstrous, shifting chest. She tilted her head, her void black eyes staring deeply into his glowing, panicked gaze. "It fits perfectly inside my empty," she whispered. "Can I keep it?" Chapter 4. Omen walked out of the ruined vault. Vareth followed directly behind her. His true, monstrous form had receded, but the golden threads on his skin were gone. Dark, corrosive veins pulsed visibly along his neck and jaw. He didn't care. The absolute silence she provided was a drug, and he was completely intoxicated. A dozen royal guards blocked the hallway. Their hands shook. "Halt!" the captain ordered, leveling a heavy iron spear directly at Omen's chest. "By order of the High Council, the anomaly does not leave this wing." Omen didn't stop walking. She didn't even look at the spear. The moment the iron tip crossed into her personal space, it didn't snap. It simply ceased being a weapon. The heavy metal instantly dissolved into a swarm of pale, glowing dandelion seeds that drifted harmlessly into the cold air. The captain gasped, dropping the useless wooden shaft. "Drop your weapons," Vareth commanded. His voice wasn't a roar. It was a low, lethal promise that vibrated through the floorboards. "Or I will let her swallow your memories." The guards instantly threw their swords to the stone floor. They pressed their backs against the walls, terrified of even breathing on her. Omen and Vareth entered the grand hall. The High Council was waiting. 20 warlords, draped in shadow and armor, stood around the obsidian table. Vexla was among them, leaning heavily against a pillar, his ears still stained with dried, dark blood. "You are leading a deletion into the throne room, my king," Lady Morana stepped forward. She was a high warlord, her eyes burning with crimson fire. She is eating the castle's gravity. The border worlds are tearing themselves apart. Vareth walked past Morana and sat on his cracked obsidian throne. He looked at the council. Let them tear. The hall erupted in outraged shouts. She has infected your mind, Morana yelled over the noise. She marched directly up the steps toward Vareth. She drew a jagged dagger forged from blood iron, stepping extremely close to the Demon King. If you cannot execute the glitch, Vareth, I will do it for you. Morana stood inches from Vareth's arm. Her crimson aura flared, hostile and arrogant. Down on the floor, Omen stopped. She turned her head. A slow, terrifyingly smooth rotation. Her void black eyes locked onto Morana. Your colors are bleeding into his quiet, Omen whispered. The words bypassed the air and dragged like a rusted blade across the inside of Morana's skull. Morana staggered. She raised her dagger toward Omen. Shut your mouth, anomaly. You are standing in my empty, Omen stated. Reality warped. Morana's blood iron dagger didn't melt. It simply lost its opacity, turning as transparent as glass before evaporating into thin air. But it didn't stop at the weapon. The space between Morana and Vareth physically distorted. Morana's left arm, the one closest to Vareth, began to flicker. It turned to black static. She tried to scream, but the sound was instantly deleted from her throat. Her armor, her skin, her presence, it was being slowly erased from the visual spectrum. The entire council froze in pure terror. Vareth sat perfectly still on his throne. His glowing golden eyes widened. She wasn't just erasing a threat, she was protecting her source of silence. It was a cosmic, alien version of jealousy. She was a black hole, and she was violently guarding the only star that belonged to her. A dark, feral smirk pulled at Vareth's lips. Step back, Morana, Vareth ordered, his voice dripping with dark amusement. She does not like you touching what is hers. Morana scrambled backward, tumbling down the stairs. The moment she put 10 feet of distance between herself and Vareth, her arms stopped flickering. She collapsed on the floor, gasping for air, her mind shattered by the brief taste of non-existence. You see? Vexla shouted from the back. She answers to no logic. She is a threat to the cosmos. She is mine, Vareth declared. The absolute authority in his voice crushed the room. Anyone who steps into her shadow will cease to exist. Before the lords could protest, the castle violently shook. It wasn't an earthquake. The very fabric of the demon realm groaned under an impossible weight. The massive obsidian ceiling of the grand hall cracked open. A blinding, agonizingly pure white light flooded the room. The shadows burned away instantly. The warlords screamed, dropping to their knees and shielding their eyes from the holy radiation. Vareth stood up. The silence in his head remained, but his demonic instincts flared with absolute hatred. A figure descended through the cracked ceiling. 6 wings of burning liquid gold. Armor forged from condensed starlight. It was an Archangel of Judgment from the high heavens. Vareth, King of the Damned. The Archangel's voice was a booming chorus of 1,000 righteous trumpets. You harbor a void, you shelter the unwritten. Vareth stepped in front of Omen. His massive shadow exploded upward, clashing against the holy light. Get out of my sky! The treaty is broken, the Archangel declared, raising a spear of pure, blinding sunlight. By the decree of the light realm, the anomaly is sentenced to erasure, and you, for shielding it, shall burn. The Archangel hurled the spear of light directly at them. It was a weapon designed to vaporize a demon instantly. Vareth braced himself, ready to rip his soul apart to deflect the holy strike. But a freezing pale hand pushed past his shoulder. Omen stepped in front of the Demon King. She didn't look at the spear of sunlight hurtling toward her face. She looked up at the burning angel. The bright thing is screaming, she whispered into the Archangel's mind. It is too loud. Chapter 5. The spear of pure, condensed starlight slammed directly into Omen's chest. The warlords braced for a blinding explosion. They expected the anomaly to be vaporized into ash. It didn't happen. The holy weapon didn't pierce her. It didn't burn her. The moment the blinding light touched her pale skin, the radiant energy instantly decayed into a dull, heavy gray. The unbreakable spear of judgment turned into a brittle piece of dead chalk. It snapped in half and crumbled to the stone floor as gray dust. The Archangel froze midair. The 6 wings of liquid gold stuttered, dimming in pure, unadulterated shock. Impossible. The light purges all shadow. Omen didn't look at the dust on the floor. She slowly tilted her head up to the cracked ceiling. "The bright thing is choking on its own glare," Omen whispered. The words didn't echo. They crawled directly up the pillars of light, sinking their teeth into the Archangel's mind. "It has too many open eyes," she continued. "Let me close your tomorrow." She raised her hand. She didn't point. She just pinched the empty air between her fingers. The Archangel didn't even have time to scream. The 6 wings of burning gold instantly inverted, turning into a hollow, freezing black. The holy armor didn't melt. It lost its 3rd dimension. The Archangel was violently compressed into a flat, 2-dimensional stained glass window suspended in the air. Then, the glass shattered. Millions of soundless, jagged fragments rained down from the sky, dissolving into absolute nothingness before they ever hit the floor. The Archangel was completely deleted from reality. A suffocating, terrified silence crushed the Grand Hall. The High Council lords pressed themselves against the obsidian walls, their breaths trembling. They had just witnessed a supreme entity of the cosmos unwritten with a single pinch of a girl's fingers. Vareth stood motionless. The golden eyes of the Demon King were wide. He didn't feel fear. He felt an overwhelming, violent obsession. She was the ultimate end of all things. And she was standing perfectly still in front of his throne, protecting him. Magnificent. A slow, mocking clap echoed from the shadows behind the throne. Crix, the High Chancellor, stepped out of the darkness. His sharp, pale face wore a twisted smile of absolute triumph. In his hands he held a pulsating, pitch-black artifact, the Mirror of the Abyss. "A flawless deletion," Crix laughed, stepping down the stairs. "The warlords think she is a weapon. The angels think she is an invader. But they are all beautifully wrong." Vareth's jaw tightened. "I will mount your head on a spike, Crix. You let the parasites into my vault." "I had to test the void, my king." Crix spread his arms wide. "I had to know if the legend was true. And look at her. She didn't just kill the angel. She absorbed the concept of it." Crix stopped at the bottom of the stairs, pointing a long, sharp finger directly at Omen. "Do you know why she has no aura, Vareth? Do you know why she is the only thing in this miserable, fractured cosmos that silences your madness?" Crix's smile stretched impossibly wide. "Because she belongs to you." Vareth's golden eyes narrowed. "Speak plainly, Chancellor, before I tear your tongue out." "She is not an alien, my king. She is your final wish made flesh," Crix shouted, his voice echoing off the broken ceiling. 10,000 years of agony. 10,000 years of begging the universe for the screaming to stop. The cosmos finally answered. Crix raised the Mirror of the Abyss. The glass didn't show Omen's reflection. It showed Vareth's broken, bleeding soul. "She is your desire for absolute silence," Crix revealed, dropping the heavy truth onto the room. "She is a deletion command, pulled straight from your own exhausted mind. The end you begged for. If you keep her near, if you truly let her into your heart, she will permanently unwrite you." The Grand Hall plunged into a dead silence. Vareth stopped breathing. He looked at Omen. She was the only thing that gave him peace. But that peace wasn't a cure. It was an execution. Loving her meant erasing his own existence. Omen didn't look at Crix. She didn't look at the warlords. She looked down at her own hands. For the first time since she materialized in the wasteland, she glitched differently. She didn't flicker into static. Her pale, flawless skin shuddered. A single drop of thick, black tar leaked from the corner of her void black eye. It slid down her freezing cheek. A tear. The anomaly was experiencing terror. Not of dying, but of killing him. "The quiet is a trap," Omen whispered, her voice fracturing into a desperate, broken echo. She took a step back. "Omen, stop," Vareth ordered. His voice shook. He stepped toward her, his hand reaching out. "Your rhythm is warm," she said, staring at the massive chest where she had felt his frantic heartbeat. "If I stay in your shadow, the warmth will rot. I will delete you." "I don't care," Vareth snarled, the 3 demonic pitches returning, laced with pure, desperate heartbreak. He closed the distance, reaching for her freezing shoulder. "I choose the quiet. I choose you." "No." She stepped backward again. She didn't just move away. She raised her pale hands and physically grabbed the empty air. With a sickening, tearing sound, she ripped the fabric of reality wide open. A massive, jagged tear in space violently unzipped behind her. It wasn't a portal. It was the pure primordial abyss, the crushing gravity of absolute zero whipped violently into the grand hall. "Omen!" Vareth roared, lunging forward. "Please don't love the empty," she whispered. She let go of the fabric and fell backward. Omen plummeted directly into the crushing dark of the abyss, the tear in reality violently snapping shut right as Vareth's fingers brushed the empty air where she used to be. Chapter 6. The tear in reality violently snapped shut. The silence vanished. A billion slaughtered souls crashed back into Vareth's skull simultaneously. It wasn't just noise. It was a physical, apocalyptic agony that ripped through his brain like shattered glass. Vareth dropped to his knees. The obsidian floor spider-webbed beneath his weight. He clutched his head, his golden eyes completely swallowed by the pitch-black void of his pupils. He wasn't a king anymore. He was a starving beast violently robbed of its only cure. "My king!" Vexla shouted, rushing forward but stopping 10 feet away. "The anomaly is gone. The execution order is gone. You are free." Vareth slowly looked up. "Bring her back." "She fell into the abyss." Crix laughed from the top of the stairs, still clutching the mirror. His face was twisted in absolute victory. "You cannot bring back a hole in the universe, Vareth. The system corrected itself. You are saved." Vareth didn't speak. His shadow simply detached from the floor. It lashed out faster than the speed of sound. It didn't strike Crix. It completely swallowed the High Chancellor. Crix didn't even have the chance to scream. The massive, towering demon was instantly compressed by a crushing anti-gravity force, folding into a marble-sized sphere of pure black matter before popping out of existence. No blood, no mess, just immediate deletion. The remaining warlords screamed, scattering toward the massive iron doors. Vareth ignored them. He stood up, his chest heaving, his veins pulsing with corrosive dark matter. He walked to the exact spot in the empty air where Omen had fallen. He raised his hands. "Vareth, no!" Vexla yelled, dropping his scythe entirely. "The sky is breaking! The realm needs you!" Vareth didn't use magic. He used pure apocalyptic grief. He dug his bare hands into the invisible fabric of space and violently ripped his arms apart. Reality tore open. The cosmic horror of the primordial abyss stared back at him. A swirling, non-Euclidean storm of colors that had no names and gravity that pulled in 6 different directions. He didn't hesitate. He stepped over the edge. Vexla stared at the jagged tear in the universe, his voice barely a whisper over the deafening collapse of the castle. He isn't going to save the world. He is fighting the universe for the right to die. Falling into the void wasn't physical, it was conceptual. Vareth plummeted through the absolute cold. Abstract shapes and dead timelines slashed at his skin. The crushing pressure of the abyss actively rejected him. He didn't care. He tracked the single tiny beacon of absolute silence in the infinite dark. He found her. Omen was drifting in the center of the nothingness, her knees pulled to her chest, her pale hair floating like a halo of dead static. Vareth pushed through the crushing void. But the abyss was a perfect quarantine. Every inch he moved toward her cost him a piece of his reality. His heavy armor rusted into gray ash and blew away. The skin on his left forearm began to flicker, turning into black, glitching static. He was being deleted just by occupying her space. He lunged forward and caught her. He wrapped his massive, glitching arm tightly around her waist. Omen gasped. A jarring, unnatural sound that defied her nature. She opened her void black eyes, staring at his face. "Your timeline is burning," Omen whispered. Her voice fractured into 1,000 crying, robotic echoes. "You are leaking into my nowhere. Let go." Vareth looked down at his arm. His fingers were actively turning into floating, transparent particles. He was dissolving. He didn't let go. He pulled her flush against his chest. "The noise is back, Omen," Vareth said. His voice was completely broken, stripped of all power. "It hurts. I am a deletion command," she pleaded. She pushed her freezing hands against his massive chest, trying to force him away. A second drop of black tar leaked from her eye, floating upward in the zero gravity. "I will unwrite your heart. The system demands it." Vareth's skin was peeling away into light. His legs were already losing their physical form. But he smiled, a feral, entirely peaceful smile. He buried his face into her freezing pale neck, inhaling the intoxicating silence. "If you are my death," Vareth whispered, holding on to his executioner as the universe tried to erase him. "Then eat me." Chapter 7. The Abyss did not tolerate anomalies. And right now, Omen was a catastrophic anomaly. She was crying. Drops of thick black tar floated upward in the zero gravity. The primordial void didn't understand grief. It didn't understand love. It only understood absolute erasure. A massive, crushing storm of antimatter materialized around them. It wasn't just trying to erase Vareth anymore. It was trying to crush them both. The Abyss was violently purging a sickness. Vareth felt the gravity violently spike. He didn't have a physical body left below his ribs. His armor was gone. His legs were glowing, transparent dust, scattering into the endless dark. But he still had his arms. He wrapped his glitching, fading arms around Omen. He pulled her fiercely against his chest and turned his back to the antimatter storm. The first shockwave hit. Vareth's back arched. Pure, agonizing erasure ripped through his remaining flesh. He didn't roar, he just gritted his teeth, letting his own soul burn away to shield her from the storm. "Vareth!" Omen screamed. It wasn't a distorted, telepathic glitch in his mind. It was a real, physical sound. Her voice tore through the absolute vacuum of the Abyss. She had a voice. "Don't look at the storm," Vareth choked out. His jaw was crumbling into light. He was fading fast. "Look at me. It is taking you," she sobbed, clutching his dissolving shoulders. "My empty is eating you." Another wave of antimatter slammed into Vareth's back. His physical shell was almost entirely gone. He was nothing but a fading ghost of a demon king, using his last spark of existence to protect his own executioner. "I am already gone," Vareth whispered. He reached up with a transparent hand, brushing a black tear from her freezing cheek. "You gave me the quiet. You saved me." "I do not want the quiet," Omen screamed at the endless dark. The Abyss surged. The final, absolute wave of destruction closed in from all sides. A wall of crushing, zero-dimensional pressure meant to grind them into nothingness. Omen looked at the terrifying storm. Then she looked at Vareth. He was closing his glowing eyes. He was smiling. He was letting go. "No," she whispered. Her pitch-black eyes flared, not with cold static, with fierce, defiant life. If the universe wanted to take him, it would have to go through her. She grabbed his fading face. "Omen," Vareth started. She didn't let him finish. Omen pulled him forward and crashed her lips against his. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a violent, cosmic rebellion. The moment their lips touched, the absolute zero of the Abyss collided with the dying, burning core of the Demon King. The ultimate erasure activated. But Omen didn't let the universe erase him. She opened the endless void inside her own chest, and she pulled his entire existence directly into herself. She became his vault. She became his world. The antimatter storm hit them. There was no explosion, no sound. The entire dimension simply collapsed inward on their kiss. Light died. Time stopped. Space ceased to exist. Everything faded to absolute black. Chapter 8. Omen fell. She did not hit a solid floor. The absolute black of her own internal void swallowed the antimatter storm, and she plunged into the center of the nothingness, bringing the fading Demon King with her. Gravity here did not exist. Time did not sequence. Vareth floated beside her in the endless dark. He was no longer a towering, monstrous nightmare of 1,000 eyes. He wasn't the terrifying Demon King. The Abyss had stripped away his power, his crown, and his armor. He was just Vareth, and he was still fading. The cosmic erasure the Abyss had triggered was still eating him. His legs were entirely transparent. The edges of his broad shoulders were crumbling into pale, glowing ash. Omen frantically grabbed his chest. "Stop," she pleaded. The glitch in her voice was entirely gone. She sounded like a terrified human girl. "I swallowed the storm. Why are you still breaking?" "Because I am inside you, Omen," Vareth whispered. His golden eyes were dimming. He raised a half-transparent hand and touched her face. "You are the execution order. The deeper I go, the faster I fade. Then I will spit you out," she sobbed, black tar tears floating upward into the dark. "I will open the empty and put you back. If you put me back." "The noise returns," Vareth said. His voice was incredibly weak, but his smile was the most peaceful expression she had ever seen on him. 10,000 years, Omen. 10,000 years of screaming. You gave me silence. You gave me peace, Let me rest." "No!" Omen screamed. She pressed both of her freezing hands against his fading chest. She was a black hole. She was designed to consume, to unwrite, to erase. But as she looked at the only existence that had ever treated her empty space as a home, a terrifying, beautiful contradiction sparked inside her chest. She didn't want to erase him. She wanted to keep him. "I am the void," Omen whispered, staring fiercely into his dimming golden eyes. "I decide what ceases to exist, and I do not give you permission to die." Vareth's eyes widened slightly. Omen closed her eyes and pulled. She didn't pull him deeper into the nothingness. She pulled the concept of his existence into her own empty core. She actively rejected the fundamental programming of the multiverse. The void inside her violently shifted. Instead of dissolving Vareth's remaining soul, the endless, crushing emptiness began to solidify. It compressed. It folded in on itself, wrapping tightly around the fading light of the Demon King. Vareth gasped. The erasure stopped. His crumbling shoulders stabilized. The pale, glowing ash stopped flaking away. Omen opened her eyes. She wasn't a glitching syntax error anymore. The void black of her eyes fractured, revealing a stunning, impossible ring of molten gold around her pupils, a perfect reflection of Vareth's soul. In the center of the absolute nothingness, a single heartbeat echoed. Thump, thump. It wasn't Vareth's chaotic, roaring engine. It was hers. Omen, the anomaly, the suicidal wish, had just forged a heart to keep the Demon King alive. "Omen," Vareth breathed out, staring at the golden rings in her eyes. "You are loud again," she whispered, leaning her forehead against his. Her voice was soft, melodic, and entirely real. "But it is a good loud. It is just you." Vareth pulled her flush against his chest. He didn't care that they were floating in the middle of a dead void. He didn't care about his broken kingdom. He buried his face in her hair and held her as if she were the only anchor in the universe. Because she was. "Take us back," Vareth commanded softly. Omen smiled. A small, terrifyingly beautiful smile. She raised her hand, her fingers no longer glitching into static, and snapped her fingers. The void shattered. The obsidian floor of the grand hall materialized beneath Vareth's boots. He stumbled slightly, the sudden return of gravity hitting him hard. The cracked ceiling of the castle, the ruined pillars, the scattered ashes of the Archangel, it was all exactly as they had left it. Vexla and the remaining warlords were pressed against the far wall, staring in absolute, paralyzed disbelief. The tear in reality had vanished, and standing in the center of the ruins was the Demon King. He was alive. His physical form was completely restored. But something was fundamentally different. The heavy, suffocating, world-ending aura of madness was gone. The thick golden threads that had stitched his skin together were completely healed, leaving only faint, elegant golden scars. He wasn't vibrating with chaotic violence. He radiated an absolute, terrifyingly calm authority. Beside him stood Omen. She wasn't glitching. She wasn't an empty vessel. She stood tall, her presence anchored to the world. When she looked at the High Council, the void black of her eyes with their new golden rings made the warlords instinctively drop to their knees. She no longer just passively absorbed gravity, she commanded it. Vexla slowly walked forward, his scythe lowered. He looked at Vareth's healed face, then at Omen's chest, where he could faintly hear the steady, rhythmic beat of a brand new heart. "You survived the erasure," Vexla whispered, dropping to one knee. Vareth looked down at his executioner. "There is no erasure," Vareth stated. His voice didn't echo in 3 demonic layers. It was a single, deep, unshakable command. "There is only my queen." Vareth reached out and took Omen's hand. The warlords of the High Council bowed their heads entirely to the floor. They didn't bow out of fear of madness. They bowed to the absolute, supreme law of the new cosmos. 2 beings who had violently forced the universe to rewrite its own rules, simply because they refused to let each other go. Vareth looked at Omen. "The quiet is ours," Omen whispered in his mind. Vareth smirked, pulling her close. "Forever."